Welcome to a noob's guide to Belegar Ironhammer. This is Belegar, chief of Clan Angrand and the true king of Karak-Eight-Peaks, a dwarf with a suspiciously familiar-sounding backstory who, despite amazing combat prowess and years of victory, is embittered from the loss of his ancestral dwarfhold and vows to one day reclaim all of Karak-Eight-Peaks. So now he's putting together an elite force to push deep behind enemy lines and cross misty peaks to retake a lonely mountain, all so his woolly backside can go back to polishing the ancestral throne. But it's not all beards, broads, and beer for poor Belegar. He may be the eponymous potentate of the King in the Warlord DLC for Total War Warhammer, but at the start of the game, he's a ruler of couches, futons, and whatever unused crevices other sympathetic dwarfs put him up in. And that's dwarfs with a explicitly pronounced F, which makes them unique from any other fantasy franchises, in a very real and legally binding sense. Clan Angrand once carved out a life for themselves in the igneous splendor of Karak-Eight-Peaks, where they tunneled deep into the mountainside, creating halls, galleries, and strip malls filled with karate studios and beard weave shops. It's said Clan Angrand even created a grand staircase with 1,000 steps to the top of the mountain called the Silver Way, which sounds super impressive until you realize that's only like 2/3 of the Empire State Building, and the Silver Way doesn't even have an observation deck where you can see King Kong or 90s meet cute Meg Ryan being sleepless in Seattle from the top. Instead, the dwarfs delved too deep and found what Meg Ryan looks like now. Taking advantage of their confusion, night goblins broke into the Dowie fortress and forced the distraught dwarfs to retreat to a last bastion citadel. And then the Skaven broke in, because when it rains, it pours, and Clan Angrand was forced to recognize that maybe Karak-Eight-Peaks is a silly place and they needed to move elsewhere. Cue a dozen generations of Clan Angrand kings unwilling to move on from their past glories, who spend every Saturday glued to football on the telly, repeating that same story about the time they almost went to state championship, while sloshing their pint onto anyone trapped nearby. From there, it all turned into an extended Four Yorkshire Gentlemen sketch, with everyone in Clan Angrand forced to eat snowballs just to survive, as dwarfs don't exactly hand out cities to kings who lost the last one. So that Clan Angrand found itself hoboing between mountain hovels, scraping by on odd jobs, until even that required too much effort, and they decided to tramp on any doorstep that didn't spray them with a water hose in the morning. This time, drifting on the open road transformed Clan Angrand from battle-savvy warriors to artful dodgers who can spot a mark from a mile away and tell a ghost story so candy that they can jungle up with handouts until some flat-footed bull runs them off, and they're forced to go back stamp collecting once more. And the new king of this hobo nation is Belegar, last chief of the Angrand, who surfs couches and bums his days away like a true gentleman of the road, without 2 nickels to rub together, and all he has left in the world are his iron hammer, a bindle on his back, and a whole list of grudges to settle with the squatters in Karak-Eight-Peaks, along with a burning dream that one day he will be crowned the Hobo King of Big Rock Candy Mountain. This grudge is the first thing you see when you start Belegar's campaign, and it sits there like Asian parents, with accusatory glances and half-veiled implications, until Belegar Ironhammer becomes the dwarf his parents always thought he would be. But the name Ironhammer is really a misnomer. Belegar is the anvil that the Skaven and goblins break themselves on. Born with a profound hatred of his enemy, normally exclusive to white supremacists and IT workers, dwarfs fighting alongside him have an additional morale bonus when caving in the heads of Skaven and Greenskins, and it's when he puts their cities to siege that Belegar's leadership really shows through. And if there's one thing you should know about Warhammer dwarfs, who call themselves the Dowie, it's that a grudge unsettled is like a wedgie unpicked. You can try and ignore the grating feeling of bloomers clefting your butt cheeks, but it just gets worse, until all you can think about is that sheet of sandpaper you call pants corking your bunghole. This is Belegar's reality, groveling for just one more magic rune to try and get revenge with, whose proud ancestry means he's always welcome at a dwarf lord's table, but is politely reminded every night that, oh, shouldn't you be moving on to look for help elsewhere? But through all this humiliation, Belegar has one constant source of support, his wire-framed wonder bra of a wife, Kima Ironhammer. which sounds perfectly innocuous until you realize that his is likely the only healthy relationship in the entirety of Warhammer, since you can't exactly count tic-tac-toe and Swoop or everyone's favorite swinging Sylvanians. Like all the races created by Games Workshop, the dwarfs reek of projection. These author surrogates are cave-dwelling denizens who spend all their time with other dudes in dimly lit rooms crafting little respected works of art, only to have them destroyed by football hooligans. Yet, despite having fingers nimble enough to paint an army of miniatures, they can't ever find a date because dwarf women are 20 times rarer than males, and all the good ones are already taken anyway, don't you know? Though they're likely not doing themselves any favors by opening with, "Do you want to see my hammer?" Belegar's wife, Kima Ironhammer, comes from a long and proud tradition of beardless, curvaceous women warriors who kick enough ass to found their own kingdoms and stand in any shield wall, yet somehow they're conspicuously absent from Creative Assembly's Warhammer game, considering that even the flop Warhammer Age of Reckoning included these lady murder machines. It seems a purposeful omission, which is a shame because dwarf mating rituals put even a bird of paradise to shame. The whole process is more secret than the kinks of the Queen of England, but one case in the Book of Grudges lets slip that a dowry is expected of any amorous and ambitious dwarf suitor. The price is set by the nuptial scales, where the bride-to-be is weighed out and her dowry set at her weight in gold. This has led to proud dwarf fathers fattening up their daughters before the wedding night, as both dwarf and hip-hop culture rightly logic that the thicker the bride, the better the cake. Not to be sidelined, dwarf women instituted the gartering of the girth, a ceremony where a would-be suitor must be able to wrap his beard around a lady's waist before proposing, undoubtedly instituted by those who understand that both length and girth are necessary for a good marriage. And with Kima as his unique mount, Belegar proves that even a penniless hobo can be attractive so long as his blood is blue and his collar is white. But Belegar himself comes with more baggage than a Kardashian, literally haunted by his family's mistakes as he's saddled with a slew of spectral ancestors who follow him around shouting about his unsettled grudge, never minding the fact that they were the ones that lost Karak-Eight-Peaks in the first place. So in your campaign, you could stick around Karak Norn and fight the battles of your current landlords, but you owe the other dwarfs about as much as it'll cost you to pawn back the Ironhammer, because Belegar's campaign is all about the Reconquista. And he'd best hurry, because he's not the only one with his eyes on the prize. The Night Goblin Skarsnik already calls himself the supreme ruler of 8 Peaks, and the Skaven Queek Headtaker is styled the Lord of the City of Pillars, which starts the game with a 3-way race to the mountain, and the only prize for second place is a locked gate and an extra army waiting to curb stomp you when you straggle in. But Belegar will have to launch his campaign on a budget drafted by Scrooge McDuck. As it turns out, a culture based around seeking and hoarding gold isn't particularly generous to cockamamie expeditions. Even though you can recruit normal troops from dwarf holds, you'll be paying their salary at double their normal rate until you manage to take back 8 Peaks. And since Belegar's DLC adds unique regiments of renown to the dwarf campaign, you'll want to save your gold piles for these specialists, like the Goblobber, which hurls live goblins at the enemy to scare them out of their nightcaps. So instead of a professional army of armored grumblers, you'll be fielding what amounts to a vagrant militia. Without a home to call their own, the warriors of Clan Angrand all went sticks to the wind, but they're still proud dwarfs at their core, and when Belegar calls, they'll come back faster than fleas on a dog. But a lifetime of riding the rails have changed their battle habits. They're sneaky as goblins and more than happy to bushwhack you so they can get back to drinking ale all the sooner. And they're fast, well, fast for a dwarf. And since they're cheap ranged infantry with vanguard deployment and stalk, these rangers are perfect for the king with empty pockets. Because when you're fighting back unwashed masses of unarmored goblins, orcs, and skaven, a bolt will put them in the ground as well as a bullet, though neither can do very much about the smell. But even among these rangers, there is an elite core. corps, those trained under Joseph Bugman himself. No dwarf alive can match their sharpshooting, axe-throwing, or ale guzzling. Their gear is weather-worn and their clothing tattered, but Bugman's rangers are treated as royalty by all the clans, and when Belegar sets off to battle, these rangers lead the way. Normally, you'd accentuate this by giving enemies a whiff of the old dwarf grape shot, but cannons are too expensive to waste on a losing venture, so Belegar has to make do with bolt throwers. These puppies have been in service since the days of the ancestor gods. They're reliable, accurate, and still able to pick a fly off a troll's backside, and if you believe any of that, I'll let you pull the other one. But if nothing else, oversized crossbow technology is intrinsically reliable, and as they're armor piercing, you can be sure they'll skewer opponents faster than you can say dog fart. Combine all these units together and you get a front line of Belegar and his 4 ghost dads screaming for goblin-flavored puddin' pops, who scare the daylights out of anyone they fight and will never run from a battle, since what do they care, they're already dead. Of course your own troops love this and get a boost to leadership from being around dwarfs so stubborn they refuse to let a little thing like death stop a good grudgin'. These guys wade in and get more eyes on them than Tupac, while your rangers show the enemy what 12 inches of hardwood can do to an exposed rear. And to emphasize this point, Belegar has a unique red line that can be used to buff rangers into the nastiest, shootinest, rootinest, tootinest skirmishers a greenskin ever saw. If you're playing on higher difficulties, the lightning strike skill is a must, as picking off your enemies one at a time is preferential to the bullcocky you'll be facing otherwise. And the only thing standing between you and the promised land are mountains full of goblins, scorching deserts, hordes of orcs, and a rat infestation so intense that it'd be better just to burn the house down. And even when you finally manage to secure 8 peaks, don't think it'll be lakes of beer and soft beds. Taking the fortress will paint a target on your back so large even Mr. Magoo could hit it, so you'll need to make it harder to get into than a greased pickle jar. And Belegar manages this with his unique Karak-Eight-Peaks landmark, which gives your troops extra defense, more experience, and magic damage when they're under siege. And that's a when, not if, that will happen. Sure, Belegar may not have standalone black library books like Skarsnik and Queek Headtaker, but that's alright, because he's doing the thing he was born for. The one thing no other Ironhammer has managed, giving the dwarfs of Clan Angrand back their home. And besides, Belegar's book is better anyway. It's called The Hobbit, and this campaign is the only worthwhile adaptation of it ever created. So go grab your favorite churchwarden pipe and settle in to help regain the throne for the true king of Karak-Eight-Peaks. Thanks for watching. Before you start a Belegar campaign, check out the recommended mods in the video description below. And if you enjoyed this video, subscribe to see more. And if you've watched the entire Noob's Guide playlist, maybe go out for a walk and see a therapist channel. Then come back and consider joining the channel. Or don't. You're an adult, and you shouldn't do whatever a voice on the internet tells you, even if it says, "Would you kindly" first.